Good morning and welcome to the webinar. Today's topic is activities that enhance engagement in dementia care. Thank you so much for joining us today. These complimentary webinars are brought to you through a collaboration of sponsorship with O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, Caring Companions at Home, as well as Alzheimer's Orange County. My name is Lauren Weiss. I am the Educational Services Manager here at Alzheimer's Orange County, and I will be your host today. Our sponsors are providing these webinars to you as a service to the community on topics that are beneficial for anyone who cares for and works with older adults. We hope you find today's presentation informative and useful. Today, our presenter is going to be our very own Kim Bailey. Before I introduce our presenter, I'll review what you need to know if you are interested in earning continuing education credit, or CE credit, for today's webinar. CE credit is available for RCFE administrators, licensed RNs and LVNs, and for LMFT, LCSW, LEP, and LPCC professionals through CAMP and the BBS. You must be online for the full 60 minutes. You must have access to both audio and visual on your computer. If you want CE credit, do not share the link to join with others. This is your unique record of attendance. If you share your link or use another attendee's link, you will not receive CE credit. Please answer the poll questions immediately. This is proof of your active attendance. If you have problems accessing or answering the poll questions, please type into the chat box to let us know you're having trouble, and you can type your response in the chat box as well to let us know you're actively attending. If we don't receive any response from you regarding the poll questions, you will not qualify for CE credit. Please complete the survey immediately as you exit the webinar. You will only receive a survey link by email if you do not complete the survey when exiting the webinar. The email with the survey link is sent out 24 hours after the end of the webinar, and this link is unique to you and your attendance, so please do not share it with others. A certificate of completion will be issued to you by email within 10 days, as long as all of the other CE requirements are also met. And just a few basics for everyone. Your mic and video are automatically disabled and will remain so throughout the presentations, but you will have the opportunity to ask the presenter questions about the presentation by typing your question into the chat box in the taskbar. We will save your questions and answer them at the conclusion of the webinar. If the Q&A session runs long, you're welcome to stay for that, but if you're requesting CE credit, you are only required to stay for 60 minutes. We will not be responding to any raised hands unless we ask you to raise your hand for a specific reason. Also, again, please remember to complete the survey immediately as you exit the webinar. So with all that said, I would like to now introduce our speaker, Kim Bailey. Kim Bailey is a gerontologist and has worked in the field as a lecturer and healthcare professional for over 30 years. She's the program and education specialist with Alzheimer's Orange County, where she coordinates the early memory loss and connect to culture programs and provides educational instructions for families, clinical staff, and the greater community. As a former adjunct faculty professor, Ms. Bailey taught at California State University of Fullerton and Vanguard University. She has also served as a corporate gerontologist for the Hartford Insurance Group, director of community relations and development for the UC Irvine Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, which is now UCI Mine, and consultant for Alzheimer's Cares Associates and principal for care management for older adults. Ms. Bailey is dedicated to serving the needs of our older adult community and is passionate about assisting individuals and families affected by memory loss. She holds a Master's of Science degree in gerontology and a BA in sociology with a minor in human services, both from California State University of Fullerton. So I will now hand it over to Kim.
Okay, thank you so much, Lauren, and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about activities because I feel that they're so critical to what we do, both as professionals and as family caregivers. So many of you have known this information. I hope for those of you that already know some of these things that it's a good review, but I think it should be especially useful for our family members today, as well as anyone new to the industry. So I'll start out by talking a little bit about dementia and why it does have an impact on our ability to connect in a meaningful way with persons living with dementia. There's a couple of strategies that I want to cover with you. My favorite is the person-centered approach, and we'll talk about that, as well as David Troxell's best friends approach. I'll talk about the concept of contented involvement. I'll try to give you as many examples as I can of successful activities. And I will also throw in a little bit about how to right-size activities for individuals as they progress through the stages of dementia. So in thinking about these multiple examples of successful activities, I would love it if some of you seasoned professionals add your own activities to the chat box so that if you have ideas that I don't cover, we can make sure we get them out there to everybody. So you're invited to do that. So how does dementia get in the way of meaningful engagement with our family members and residents? This is a powerful quote by a leader in the field, in the professional field of dementia care, Dr. Al Power. He's written a couple of books, including Dementia Beyond Disease and Dementia Beyond Drugs. And he says, our societal view that people with cognitive changes cannot learn and grow, cannot care for others or give meaningful input, and that they don't have a useful role in society. These beliefs blind us to meaningful ways in which to engage them. So, what we want to do is keep a very open mind and not fall back on stereotypes such as, oh, well, they have dementia, so they can't learn new things, they can't do things, etc. So, yeah, so, this is just a little once over lightly about dementia for the new folks. As we always say, dementia is an umbrella term that describes a variety of different progressive degenerative brain impairments that get in the way of thinking and judgment and short-term memory and really the ability over time to take care of oneself. And these brain changes alter the person's perceptions and their impulse control. And this is why they need our help. Their interpretation of the environment and how others approach them is changing. So we have to employ useful strategies. And we know that a person may lose interest in things that they once enjoyed, or perhaps they still enjoy that activity, but they don't know how to initiate it. So they need our help. We often say that people have lost their starter buttons, but they can persevere. So get someone started in an activity they once loved and, kind of sit back and watch them go. All right. So all of the things you're seeing on your screen now are symptoms and common hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease and other types of memory impairment. And I have this slide in here for a purpose. I want you to know that when you see your loved one or your resident or your patient experiencing some of these symptoms, the most powerful and effective interaction or intervention rather is a beloved activity. So we've always had sort of this formula. When you see a person starting to accelerate or get agitated, you first want to validate them and reassure them. And then we want to do a skillful distraction into either a new subject or a new activity. So these activities are powerful tools, and always keep that in mind. So let's talk about the person-centered approach. It's been around since, oh my gosh, I think the 80s. I believe it was Thomas Kitwood who first developed this strategy over in England, if I'm not mistaken. And it really means that the activities that we plan and conduct have to be focused on the life history, personal likes, needs, and interests of the person. So we have to know the person. And for the family members, this is not so difficult because they have the history with them. But for those of you that are working in the field, we need to collect this information from families so that we know how to address the needs of our residents and do that in a person-centered way. So, ultimately, the goal of all activities is to produce a sense of comfort, a feeling of belonging or attachment. They should have a purpose or maybe relate to that person's prior occupation, and they should promote a sense of identity. And so knowing information like what did this person do for a living can go a long way in determining what activities are best. I'll never forget one day my colleague, our colleague Ben Allen, was visiting with his wife, who was at the time living in a care community, and he had her, actually like helping or maybe even taking a leadership role in a Bible study. And this was like the perfect activity for her. She was in her comfort zone because this is what she did before she became demented. So we want to really kind of do a look back and think about things that have value for the people we're caring for and convert those things into activities. We take what we know about that person's past and we use it to really plan activities which matter. And that all flies in the face of the societal view that people can't really learn and grow, can't care for others, give meaningful input, or have a useful role. So it's a good news story. It really is. So again, just to review, meaningful activities consider a person's preferred routines, their habits over their lifetime, their likes, their dislikes, their preferences, their pet peeves, their pets, their hobbies, their interests, what they like to be called, do they have a nickname, previous occupations, etc. Yep, use what you know to foster a connection, either through a one-on-one activity, could even be their personal care, or a group activity. And you use this approach all the time. So what does it look like? I've got a couple of pictures to share with you today that make me so happy. This is a picture of an Alzheimer participant in a day center in India. And they found out that she was a noted mathematician. And so they bought a simple blackboard, and she had been listless and disengaged from others in the program. And once they brought the blackboard in, she stood up there and started doing math. And that was her comfort zone. She was in the zone, and she was working on formulas. We don't know if they were accurate or not. It doesn't matter. She was doing the work that she had always done. And so imagine, sort of what this does to a person's self-esteem when they're engaged in something that really has meaning for them. And that's, that goes right into this slide about the benefits. These activities respect the person's dignity and sense of self, gives them a sense of purpose, makes them feel needed, provides them with opportunities to, connect and socialize or show off even with others. And importantly, it redirects them away from negative thoughts and actions.
Okay, we are at our first poll question. To use the person-centered approach, you must know something about that person's personal history. True or false? To use the person-centered approach, you must know something about that person's personal history. Again, if you are unable to mark the answer on your computer, please put it into the chat box what your response is. We'll give it one more second. To use the person-centered approach, you must know something about that person's personal history. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Great job, everybody. I will now hand it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so moving on from person-centered approach, I want to talk about a simple phrase that has a lot of meaning, and that phrase is contented involvement. So the best way to describe this is by prefacing this with a remark. Think about when you were young, maybe you were on a playground and there was a seesaw, right? I don't know if they have those anymore. They're probably too dangerous now, but they would become unbalanced if you sat down, the other end would go up, etc. Pardon my terrible imitation of a seesaw here. Anyway, that's what's happening with our folks with dementia because sometimes they are understimulated and they're down, and other times they're overstimulated. And both of those places are bad places to be. We want to have a comfort zone. We want people in an emotional state during which they are occupied and engaged with a meaningful activity. So again, we don't want people to be bored and understimulated. What happens when they are? They start getting agitated, plucking at their clothing, maybe pacing, getting irritated. And if they're overstimulated, then you've got a real problem too, because they may be escalating into an incident. So we want to get people into their comfort zone, that emotional state where they're occupied and engaged. And then they have that beautiful expression like the woman on in the image here, who is certainly reminding me of a woman I took care of. I took care of someone with dementia for 6 years, and much to my chagrin, she wasn't interested in a lot of activities. What she really liked doing was like this woman, she liked sitting by the front window and looking out at the neighborhood. And it turns out that she was a little Miss Nosykins her whole life in that neighborhood and loved to observe people coming and going and making comments about them. And she did that well into her disease. And so I just couldn't let it be. I thought, well, we got to do more. We can't just have her just sitting there looking out the window. So I got a bird feeder and put it out there, and I got wind chimes. Well, her family came and said she hates those things. Take them down. So anyway, I mean, sometimes you just have to let people do simple activities. Um, you know, Lauren and I were talking before the seminar today, and we were talking about like sometimes people really enjoy just sitting quietly and watching TV for a while. And sometimes we just have to let them do it. We don't want them to do it all day or all evening, but we want people in that zone between over and under stimulation. Here's another great image. Oh my gosh, this woman's got her headsets on and she is without a doubt in the zone listening to her favorite music. So music is always a winner for any stage of the illness, but also looking at photos. These are just ideas. You may, like I said, you may be sharing some in the chat box as well. Having some tea together, sitting in a chair and looking outside like my lady did. Holding a familiar object, for gentlemen, that might be a World War II medal or something, something to remind them of their occupation. Lauren, is everything okay?
Yes. Oh, I've been on video the whole time. Would anyone like to share their examples of contented involvement in activities? Is what I was just asking, just to get some conversation going.
Oh, okay, great. I thought maybe you were coming on to tell me I'm not going fast enough. All right, listening to music, as I said, taking a walk together, taking a drive together can be very meaningful, or just sitting quietly and holding hands and reminiscing. It's all about your approach. So this is another beloved picture. I love to use this illustration. This was a man in Japan who refused to come out of his room, and the family told the aides that he loved dancing. And so from that day forward, with that information, they danced him out of his room every morning. And as you can see from his expression, he was very happy to come out under those circumstances. So sometimes when things aren't working quite right, think about your approach and try to employ some strategies that make things easier for you and the person you're caring for. You can also adopt the best friends approach. And David Troxel is someone I've known for 30 years, and he has several books, but they're all around the premise that what a person with dementia needs most of all is not an aide or not a caregiver, but a friend, a best friend, a BFF. And so when you function in this type of role, the person feels safe, secure, and valued. And I guarantee you that if you're functioning as a best friend, you're going to have better interaction and more pleasure. So, and sometimes it's just the thing, where you reframe things in a different way. So instead of saying, everybody come over here, it's time to have a sing along, and being kind of directive, you walk up to a person that might be a little resistance and say, you know what, I feel like singing now, or I feel like dancing now. Come and sing and dance with me. It'll be really fun. So, when you try to engage someone as a friend rather than a professional, this can be really good. And I want to offer his books as a reference or a resource for you. There is a specific book that he's written on activities, best friends activities, and you can order all of his books. Again, it's David Troxel, and those books are available through Amazon. Okay, and then I wanted to talk about right sizing activities to match changing abilities. So this is a kind of a tough one and an important one to discuss because as people go through the illness, they're going to have a diminished capacity to follow through on some of their beloved activities. But we do not want to take those activities away from them. Instead, we're going to try to adapt them and simplify them. And also, we are going to play a larger role stepping in and being a part of the activities to ensure that they're successful. And this is kind of a crazy example, but I worked with one family here, and their loved one loved horses. She was a horseback rider and she loved horses. So when she was first diagnosed, she was still okay to ride. And then, things started to change. And so they she wasn't riding anymore, but they were having her help with the grooming of the animal and the upkeep and feeding and maintenance of the animal. And so she was able to stay close to horses in that way. And then as the years passed and she progressed even deeper into the disease, there were picture books and stories about horses that they would share with her. And then ultimately, when she was in the final stages or end stages of the disease, they had stuffed animals, horses that she could love on. And so, it sounds kind of like a silly example, but it, the family was very thoughtful in their goal to have horses remain, part of her life. And so you can, you make up your own examples. But again, I want to stress you don't want to take away things from that they love. You just want to make sure that they're adapted and that they're safe for the person with dementia. So, and if we do this, if we adapt them and simplify them, then they can continue to do the activities they love. And ultimately, the size of the activity should shrink as their performance declines. And in the later stages, activities should be more sensory. And we'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute.
Okay, our second poll question, right sizing activities ensures that the activity matches that person's ability. I was made aware our chat feature wasn't working a little while ago, so it is now. So for any reason for the first question or this question, if you weren't able to answer it via the poll question box, please do type your answer into the chat box. Again, right sizing activities ensures that the activity matches that person's ability. Okay, we'll go ahead and share the results. Wonderful job, everybody. And I'll hand it back over to Kim.
That's great. You're doing great, everyone. Okay, so I just said that activities have to become more sensory in nature when people have progressed deep into the disease. And so if you think about it, we all know that, the changes in the brain are, I mean, the disease marches through the brain and it begins to affect how people see, hear, taste, touch, all the seven, is it seven senses? I think it's seven. Anyway, all the senses become altered for people who are going through this journey. So we have learned from research that the use of sensory stimulation is a great tool that can help to lower the risk of behaviors and psychiatric symptoms. So, anytime we can use activities, think about it. It's a non-pharmacological approach as opposed to medications. And of course, in some cases, we need those medications, but we need to start with non-pharmacological strategies like the introduction of activities. So, yeah, and also as the verbal communication starts to decline, people with dementia can really benefit from sensory engagement. So let's see what that looks like. So let's start with tactile. So this is especially good for late stage individuals. I put that feel different fact bricks there because we had a lady that was in our programs here a number of years ago, and she used to be a tailor, and she was very agitated and picking at her skin. And so we tried introducing some different fabrics to her, and she was so happy. We put them all out on a table and she started moving them around and experiencing them. And so, and again, this is like, it's person-centered care because she was a tailor and it felt right for her. People can also identify shapes by touch. We can give lotion. We can give hand massages with wonderful scented oils, if as long as they're not allergic, of course. We can. I don't like that. Identify everyday items in a bag by touch. I'm going to take that out of the slides from now on. But you might have success with it. I did not have a lot of success with that one. Visiting with animals is fantastic. If they have a pet or if you have a pet therapy program, this is so wonderful. And then people can paint or do sculpting, of course, using non-toxic materials. So, but petting a furry friend is a great way to decelerate high emotion. Okay, sight. So I had a big book and I laminated pictures of things that some of them were landscapes, some of them were animals. Um, I remember one time I was working with a very, very late stage nonverbal woman, and I showed her some magazine pictures of a bride with the white dress, and she just went, "Oh," and she smiled. So yeah, I mean, and if you know what they did for a living, you can have pictures of that. You can also look at photo albums together. The woman who I personally cared for at one point stopped recognizing the people in the photos and but she'd look at them avidly and say, "Oh, you have such a great family." She thought they were pictures of my family. So it's fine. I didn't correct her. Why would I do that? It would just make her feel bad. And we continue to enjoy looking at the photo albums. Um, you can do bird watching. Like I said, I did try the bird feeder. That can be a great activity for people. Hey, I'm just thinking, I should have up there the aquariums with fish. They've actually done studies that have said that the watching fish in an aquarium can calm agitated people with dementia. So painting, again, I mentioned that last time. Go outside or sit by an open window together and just enjoy nature. How about activities that affect their sound? So I've already mentioned music, and I'll just hammer home that point. Music is effective in every single stage of the disease. And people, even in the very latest, the end stage of this illness, still respond to things like music, art, spirituality. Never make the mistake of thinking that nothing's there, even in the very, very late stages. They are there, and they can respond to us, and we can give them ways to respond that are meaningful for them. So you can play instruments, you can listen to recordings of different things, you can read to them. And whether or not they follow it is not the point. They love the sound of your voice in many cases, and it's very calming to read aloud to another person. If they're a spiritual person, you can read scripture to them. Again, it's all about knowing the person. Smell. I tried the plastic bags with different things to smell, and I'm not sure that was as effective as I wanted it to be. But certainly smelling fragrant flowers is something that most people will enjoy. And then the smell of coffee brewing. How about the smell of baking bread or baking cookies? Beautiful. I mean, you can get a bread machine and that just fills the house up or the residence with this wonderful, inviting smell that really seems like home, right? So, yeah, you can cook for the person foods that smell but good, like apple pie or chicken soup. Chicken soup for the soul, right? Okay, so just we're looking for things that engage the mind, body, and soul. So music and singing and dancing is great. In our Connect to Culture program, which is our social engagement program, we often do dances and we dance to rock and roll music. It's not like when I first became a gerontologist back in, the 90s, and people were listening to a lot of big band and I don't know, the standards. Now they're listening to the Rolling Stones. So dancing and singing is great. Art, I've mentioned, and most of you are familiar with our longtime art program. It's called Memories in the Making. It started back, uh, I think, in the late 80s. I came on board with the Alzheimer's Association in 92, and they were just starting to use it as a fundraiser. What they were doing was using the paintings that they were painted by our Alzheimer artists. And what they were finding is that our Alzheimer artists were able to send a message through the paintings that they created, even when they were not verbal anymore. And I will tell you that I do remember distinctly that it kind of started in a day center down in Mission Viejo. There was a man there that was nonverbal and he kept painting the same scene over and over again. And it was very simple. It looked like a river bank and there was a tree hanging over the river like a weeping willow. He painted that obsessively. And at one point, when his wife came to pick him up, the staff said, "Does this mean anything?" And she said, "Yeah, that's where we got married." That was absolutely their sacred place. And as she explained, they got married there. They returned there for anniversaries when they raised their children. They had picnics there. So he was definitely sending a message of love to his wife and family through that painting. When words fail, art speaks. We're very fond of saying that. So, cognitive activities are good as long as they're geared to the person's level. You can use puzzles, with big pieces. Reminiscing is always great because their long-term memory is intact, whereas their short-term memory is diminished. And so talk about, when they were working, their working days. Talk about when they were raising families. Talk about the first car they ever had. Those kinds of things are all good. Exercise is fabulous and it's good for you and the people with dementia. And then if the person is a person of faith, they must they must be able to participate in spiritual activities that are a comfort to them. Okay. Personal care can be an activity. And, whether you work in a big memory care or you're just caring for somebody one-on-one, you can turn things that you do into beloved activities. Like in the bigger communities, you can have a makeover day and all the ladies get makeup and they get their nails done. I did this one-on-one with the woman who I cared for. I'd say, let's get you cleaned up in the shower. Of course, shower is not anybody's favorite word, so I replaced that with saying that we were going to have a spa day. I'd say, come on, we're going to have a spa day. I'm going to get you cleaned up and then I'm going to give you a full body massage. And when I would say massage, she would head for the bathroom. So it was kind of like a carrot I used to get her to shower. But I would spend hours doing this. And I know if you work in a residential care facility, you can't. But for one-on-one, I mean, I remember I mentioned she didn't have a lot of activities that she likes. So I would, do her hair, I would do her makeup, I would do her nails, I'd put lotion on her. And then I'd usually shoot a little video of her and send it to her kids who lived in Northern California. So, I mean, I could kind of drag that out for several hours and she really enjoyed it. So think about the activities of daily living, the bathing, dressing, grooming, eating. They're not just tasks that have to be checked off, but that's meaningful time together. Eating, we do like a whole class on nutrition and how you can make that such a social time and, really make it nice and engage the person in helping. Obviously we don't want them to burn themselves or cut themselves, but they can toss the salad, they can set the table. You can have pretty flowers on the table. You can sit down and eat with that person. It just makes it so much nicer. So think about all the ways that you can maybe convert ADLs into beloved activities.
Okay, poll question number 3. Everything you do with a person with dementia is an activity, even personal care. True or false? Everything you do with a person with dementia is an activity, even personal care. And again, if you're unable to answer the question via the poll box, please do put it into the chat box. Everything you do with a person with dementia is an activity, even personal care. Okay, we'll share the results. Again, great job, everybody. And I hand it back over to you, Kim.
Well, I'm just thrilled. You all are doing so great. All right, so I think now I just want to walk you through some ideas. And again, if you have ideas, put them in the chat box and we'll share them with everybody. But I've broken them out according to stages. And of course, stages are very arbitrary. It's really difficult to know what stage someone is in. And some days they're early stage and sometimes they're middle stage. So we don't want to pay too much attention to the framework, but except for as it pertains to activities, because you want to make sure that things aren't too simplified or too complex. So early stage, it could be name that tune. You could play popular music and guess the name of the song. There could be time spent outside in the garden or on a walk. Uh, Basic household activities or chores are great. And do you remember what I said earlier about how they've lost their starter button? This is a perfect example of how you can get them started on something and they'll continue the repetition. So they could be polishing silverware, they could be sorting silverware, they could be folding tea towels, they could be putting away dishes. These are all things that sweeping has repetition. Raking leaves has repetition. So think about those basic chores that can be good exercise and also comforting. for people with dementia, or especially think about women who have been in traditional marriages their whole lives and they took care of the inside of the house and the man took care of the outside of the house. Kind of think about those traditional gender roles, even though we don't hold to them anymore, we can apply that to the activities we plan for people. Other activities could be current events, reading the paper, talking about the news of the day, although, wow, that can be very disruptive nowadays, right? So maybe we're reading the sports page instead, or reading Dear Abby or Hints from Heloise, and maybe staying away from some of the more disturbing aspects of the news these days. So we can do some guessing games around old phrases or saying like early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, or just, play some kind of trivia game, um, puzzles, board games, simple crossword puzzles, dancing, my favorite dancing exercise, taking pictures, cooking together. There's so many things that you can do. And then getting into more middle stages. And by the way, most of us know that the middle stages of the disease are the time frame that really lasts the longest for most people who are living with some type of memory impairment. Um, this is just a kind of a sprawling category of time that where the person is just slowly but surely needing more and more assistance with their daily living, etc. But they're still physically healthy. So there's a lot of things they can do activities wise. So they can do sorting and matching games or objects, puzzles, dominoes, checkers, spend time outside, plant flowers in the spring, again with the bird watching or the nature walk, walk on the beach, music, dancing, even cheer dance if someone is a little bit challenged mobility wise. Arts and crafts, scrapbooking. We used to do collages with some of our folks, and we'd have them tear out pictures or cut out pictures from magazines that they liked, and they'd put together, a collage. Let's see, old photo albums, more of those household duties. But you're just going to have to cue them a little bit more if they're in the middle stages. Folding clothes, sweeping, dusting, setting the table, unloading the dishwasher. But of course, they're going to put things away in the wrong place, and that's okay because we can go back and change it later when they're taking a nap. Okay. We don't correct them. We let them do the chores the best they can and we thank them. Um, yeah, more music, listening to favorite records from back in their time. I think that research has shown that the music that has the most impact for people is the music they listen during their teenage years. I might be wrong on this, but that sounds right, doesn't it? So, it's the soundtrack of our lives. We hear a song from dating back from when we were in early adulthood or teenage years, and my gosh, we can remember where we were, who we were with, what we were doing, all of that. So music is fun, listening to those old records. CDs, I don't think we have CDs anymore. Anyway, and sing-alongs are great, especially of those old songs. I had a PowerPoint of lyrics of all these old songs, and we would show that during activities here at Al's OC and have sing-alongs, and they were a lot of fun. Okay, late stage. So, again, some of these things that I talked about earlier, giving them different things to hold on to, like a soft, cuddly blanket, a beloved stuffed animal. I like that really tactile cloth bean bags because they're fun to work in your hand, but they don't hurt anybody if they get flung or anything. So they're made out of cloth and soft beans inside. Quiet, soothing music from their favorite time period. Gentle massage. brush someone's hair. Oh my gosh, that feels so good for people to get a nice scalp massage. Um, Reminisce to music and maybe watch some old home movies if those are available. And then, oh, this next one I want to focus on for an extra minute because one of our participants today, one of our attendees, asked a question before the webinar about how she can plan to take care of a relative while the relative spouse is away for a week. So she's got the duty for a week, and what can she do? I would recommend having the well spouse, make a memory box for the loved one, and it can be filled up with activities that they love, old family pictured, valued objects, they're sort of go-to activities, and that works very well. Also, when people visit, a lot of times people will say, well, I don't really want to visit because I don't know what to do when I'm there. So if you have a memory box that has things in it, that's very helpful. So the lady I cared for, I had some really interesting things in her memory box. One was a spiral bound notebook that I found that was a diary of her travel with her husband when they were first married. They got a Volkswagen van. They traveled around the country, and I found this little diary. So I had that in there, and she could still read, and we'd talk about. I'd say, "Oh, look, see what that says? What happened that day?" And we'd talk about it, and it was really a source of joy for her. So think about objects that really are personal that can bring back those memories. And that's a good thing to have when people visit. Also, I recommend memories in the making, the painting, because if you keep art supplies set up in an area of the house and people come over to visit with the person, they can do paintings with them. It's really quite lovely. Pet therapy is wonderful. Tactile therapy, touching, massage is great. I mean, we're not so much on hugging and touching since the pandemic, but people, if they're open to that, they still need affection. And so, you have to have boundaries with that, of course, but use it if it's reasonable. And take a ride in the car and just go out and see the beautiful world that we live in. Or just sit wrapped in a blanket together in the sunshine, spend time outside. Maybe there's a little breeze blowing. So all of those things can really be meaningful. Just the sun on your face in late stage is very meaningful. So, okay. Just a couple of final considerations. We sort of talked about a lot of different things today, and I was trying to be mindful of the time and stay on cue at the time, but we want to really place our importance on the connection that we make with our residents or with our loved ones. Okay. So the connection overrides the task. So, an example of that is you want your husband to take a shower and he says no. Don't argue because you can't win when you argue, and he may get just even more frustrated and escalate. So, if you end up sitting on the couch together, holding hands and looking at wedding pictures, that's the connection, that's the outcome that is needed for him to have a great experience. And it's good for you too. So we have to sort of give up on having things perfect. Caregivers are very busy people and they've got a big list going every day and they've got a schedule to maintain. But we all know that our schedule is not their schedule. And sometimes they're resistant. And when they are, we have to learn to stop and just try to make that nice connection with them. It's much more, it overrides the task. And then also, no matter how far people with dementia have progressed in the disease, they never lose the desire to communicate and connect with others. Never. I remember early on in my career sitting with a man who was dying, Yeah, he was in a nursing home and I stopped and visited with him and he did not speak, he did not move, and I just sat with him for a while. And when I got ready to leave, I said, "Would you like a hug?" And he put his arms up. So, I mean, they say that sound is the last thing that they experience, but anyway, they never lose the desire to connect with others. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're able to do that for them all the way through. So, okay, and here's one more picture of a kind of around the world tour of person-centered care. I think this person was in Austria, if I'm not mistaken, and she was on hospice, and they knew that she loved animals, so they brought in some pets for her to interact with, and she got up from a lying down position, sat up in bed, and smiled. See, I mean, that's a lot when someone's in their final days. So her life was uh, enhanced by the visit of these two furry friends. Person-centered care. All right, so that brings us to the end of the presentation for today, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Yes, thank you so much, Kim, for all of that wonderful information. Go ahead, and if you have any questions, please type it into the chat box. I'm just going to run through a couple of items. We want to remind everyone of the importance of being aware of implicit biases or unconscious stereotypes as we care for others. Best practice is a person-centered approach where we view each person that we care for as an individual with unique needs and preferences and treat them with dignity and respect, even when they are very different from ourselves. If we always listen carefully and respectfully so that we understand their perspectives, values, and preferences, we can build trust and provide the highest quality of care. And before we begin the Q&A session, if we do run past 12:30, you are welcome to remain online to ask your question or listen to the answers. But if you need to leave the webinar, you can. Just remember that if you want to earn CE credit, you need to be online for the full 60 minutes. I also want to take this time to thank our sponsors one more time for making these presentations possible. We're so grateful for the support of O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, and Caring Companions at Home. And also don't forget about our upcoming webinars. The first one is on Thursday, June 12th at 10 a.m., Prevention Through Planning, Protecting Older Adults. This webinar is offering 2 complimentary CE credits. And then we have our next month's webinar on July 8th, and this will be on the topic of driving cessation in dementia, what you need to know. So how to have that conversation with somebody experiencing memory loss and when they're no longer safe to be driving. Okay, so now we will go ahead and get to our questions for Kim. I also want to share that in the chat box that a lot of wonderful information came in about sensory-oriented activities or contented involvement. So I had one of my favorite activities for a late-stage sensory-oriented activity is to walk barefoot on the grass, which is excellent. Tactiles help with fidgets help with that anxiety. And then Ben, our very own Ben Allen, he said, regarding the benefits of music and how to use it with people living with dementia, I recommend the documentary Alive Inside, which is about
Yeah,
music therapy. And then we also had someone post about Teepa Snow and some findings regarding people living with dementia in showers and toileting. So that link is in there as well. And then someone said, I always try to make sure everyone still feels useful, of purpose, and important, and the most vital things to remember when you are thinking of activities. And so it was a very
great.
thorough webinar, so I don't think we have many questions coming in.
Okay, that's fine.
Is
And
there
I love all the comments. Those are great.
Right. And I think just to reiterate your point on contented involvement, sometimes we just so desperately want people to do the thing that we want them to do, or, they're sitting there and they're not being active or engaged enough. But sometimes it's just that's what the person wants to do. And they're having the time of their life staring out the window, watching people or watching the television and having a conversation with it because I think they're real people. So it's just allowing them to have that space and time to do
Absolutely.
that. Um, yeah. Oh, oops. Yes, someone agreed. Yeah. So I think at this point, if we don't have any questions, if you do have any questions after the end of this webinar, again, it pops up into your head, please feel free to reach out to our helpline. The phone number is 844-373-4400. And again, that brings us to the conclusion of our webinar. So thank you so much to our presenter, Kim Bailey. Thank you for
Thank
sharing your
you.
time and expertise with us.
Thanks
Please,
for being here, everyone.
again, please watch for the survey that will open up immediately as you exit the webinar. And don't forget, you can visit our website, www.alzoc.org, to learn more about our education programs and webinars and to view recordings of our past webinars. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.